The man who shot Frank Costello in the head accidentally saved his life. Mafia boss Frank Costello was walking through the lobby of his apartment building when a gunman stepped from the shadows. The shooter was Vincent "The Chin" Gigante, acting on orders from rival mobster Vito Genovese, who wanted control of Costello's empire. According to reports, Gigante called out, "This is for you, Frank." That split-second warning changed everything. Costello turned his head just as the trigger was pulled. Instead of entering his skull, the bullet grazed his scalp. Gigante fled, believing he had just killed one of the most powerful mob bosses in America. But Costello survived. The failed hit sent shockwaves through organized crime. Rather than start a bloody war, Costello chose retirement. Genovese got the throne, Gigante beat the case, and one missed shot reshaped the future of the American mafia. Was Costello smart for walking away, or should he have fought back and started a mafia war? For years, Joseph Massino did what every New York mafia boss dreamed of doing. He stayed out of prison. While other crime families were torn apart by informants and federal indictments, Massino turned the Bonanno family into the most disciplined organization in the city. His rules were legendary. Members weren't even allowed to say his name. According to investigators, if someone needed to refer to Massino, they simply touched their ear. That's how seriously he took secrecy. But in 2003, the wall around the last Don began to crack. And the threat wasn't coming from the FBI. It was coming from family. Federal agents flipped Salvatore, good-looking Sal Vitale, Massino's underboss, brother-in-law, and one of the men he trusted most. Suddenly, the secrets weren't secrets anymore. The meetings, the murders, the hierarchy, the rules. Everything prosecutors had spent years chasing was now coming from someone sitting at the very top. As indictments closed in, paranoia consumed the Bonanno boss. And in one of the greatest betrayals in mafia history, the man who hated informants the most would eventually become one himself. The question is, what happens when the last untouchable godfather runs out of people he can trust? For decades, Chicago outfit bosses didn't just control the streets. According to federal investigators, they had influence where it mattered most, inside courtrooms, city hall, and the political machine itself. Then one man changed everything. His name was Robert Cooley, a respected attorney with deep ties to Chicago's First Ward. Cooley knew how business was really done. Judges could allegedly be bought. Cases could allegedly disappear. Politicians could allegedly be influenced. But Cooley made a decision few ever survived. He started wearing a wire. As part of Operation Gambat, federal agents secretly recorded conversations inside legendary mob hangouts, capturing evidence that prosecutors said exposed decades of corruption tied to the Chicago outfit. The investigation reached all the way to powerful Alderman Fred Roti and helped expose allegations that even murder trials could be fixed, including the case of notorious hitman Harry Alleman. By 1993, the courtroom battles were underway, and the political shield that had protected Chicago's mob for generations was finally cracking. The question is, was Robert Cooley a hero, or the most dangerous traitor the outfit ever faced?
Some movie scenes stick in your head because they're shocking. This one stuck because it completely changed how people heard three ordinary words. In Donnie Brasco, undercover FBI agent Donnie Brasco, based on real agent Joseph D. Pistone, explains to his handlers the many meanings of the phrase, "Forget about it."
Well, what's forget about it? What is it?
Depending on how it's said, it can mean, "That's incredible. Don't worry about it. I agree, I disagree," or even, "Go to hell." The scene is simple. No shootout, no betrayal, no dramatic confrontation. Just a lesson in how language worked inside the world of the mafia. What makes it unforgettable is that it feels completely authentic. Instead of showing mobsters committing crimes, it shows how they communicated. The phrase becomes a code, a shortcut, and almost a language of its own. Even people who've never seen Donnie Brasco know the line. That's why this scene still lives in people's heads nearly 30 years later. It turned three common words into one of the most quoted moments in mob movie history. Because once you've heard all the different ways to say "forget about it," you never hear those words the same way again.
Tell you something, I don't get this boat for Lefty. What?
Forget about it?
Fucking forget about it.
Some movies Some scenes are violent, others are unforgettable because of what happens before the violence. In The Untouchables, Al Capone stands before a room full of loyal lieutenants during an elegant dinner. Everyone is dressed in tuxedos. The food is flowing. The mood feels almost celebratory. Then Capone starts talking about teamwork. Using baseball as a metaphor, he lectures his men about loyalty, unity, and everyone pulling in the same direction. The speech sounds inspiring, almost motivational, and that's what makes the next moment so disturbing. Without warning, Capone grabs a wooden baseball bat and brings it down on one of his own men, again and again. The room falls silent. Nobody moves. Nobody intervenes. In seconds, the dinner transforms into an execution. What makes the scene stick with people isn't just the brutality, it's the message. Capone isn't just punishing a betrayal, he's sending a warning to everyone at that table. The scariest person in the room isn't the man holding the bat. It's every person sitting there pretending they don't see what's happening. That's why this scene still lives in our heads decades later. It shows how fear can be more powerful than loyalty. What would you have done if you were at that dinner? Some movie scenes end when the credits roll. This one stays with you. In Casino, Nicky Santoro and his brother think they're driving to a ceremony, a promotion, respect, a seat at the table. Instead, they're led into an Indiana cornfield where the truth finally catches up with them. What makes this scene so unforgettable isn't just the violence, it's the betrayal. These are men who spent years enforcing the rules, collecting debts, and protecting the organization. Yet when the decision is made, none of that matters. No speeches, no last-minute rescue, no loyalty. Just a quiet ride into the middle of nowhere. As the brothers realize what's happening, the illusion of power disappears. The people they trusted become the people carrying out the punishment. The cornfield becomes a graveyard, and the mob fantasy turns into a nightmare. What makes it even more chilling is that it was inspired by the real-life fate of Anthony and Michael Spilotro in 1986. That's why this scene lives in people's heads. It's not about power, it's about discovering far too late that the game was already over.
Before there was New York, before there was Chicago, before there was Las Vegas, there was Sicily. And the original mafia wasn't born in America. It was born in the hills, farms, and villages of southern Italy, where the government was weak and power belonged to whoever could protect it. In the mid-1800s, Sicily was a place where wealthy landowners needed protection from bandits, thieves, and rival factions. Groups of armed men began offering that protection for a price. Over time, these groups evolved into what became known as the Sicilian Mafia, or Cosa Nostra, meaning our thing. The mafia wasn't just about crime. It became a parallel government. If you had a dispute, you went to them. If you needed protection, you paid them. If you crossed them, there were consequences. Their power came from fear, loyalty, and a code of silence known as omerta. As millions of Italians immigrated to America in the late 1800s and early 1900s, some mafia members brought those traditions with them. What started in Sicily would eventually grow into the powerful American mafia families that dominated cities like New York and Chicago. But it all began in the old country, a secret society born in Sicily that would change organized crime forever. Follow OC Street Files for more true stories from the underworld.
A pickup truck crashes into an SUV outside a home in Staten Island, New York. The homeowner walks outside to investigate. Moments later, gunshots ring out. The victim wasn't just a homeowner. According to authorities, it was Francesco "Frank" Cali, the acting boss of the Gambino crime family. For decades, New York's mafia families had largely moved away from the public bloodshed that once made headlines. Frank Cali was known as a low-profile leader who avoided the spotlight and reportedly helped maintain connections between American and Sicilian organized crime. That's why his murder stunned investigators. Surveillance footage reportedly showed Cali speaking with but the case took an unexpected turn. Police arrested 24-year-old Anthony Camello, who prosecutors alleged acted alone. Instead of a mob war, investigators found themselves dealing with a suspect whose beliefs and motives raised even more questions. A powerful mafia boss survived decades in organized crime, only to be killed in front of his own home. Was Frank Cali's murder a sign that the mafia's power is fading, or proof that no crime boss is ever truly untouchable? And that's when the witness became a dead man walking. For years, the Kansas City Mafia was ruled by the Civella crime family. But in the late 1970s, a rebellion inside the organization sparked a violent internal war. The challenge came from the Sparrow brothers, Carl, Nick, and Joe Sparrow, who broke ranks with boss Nick Civella. The response was brutal. Nick Sparrow was found shot to death in the trunk of a car in 1978. Carl Sparrow survived a bombing that left him paralyzed, only to be killed in another explosion at a flea market in 1984. Joe Sparrow was later killed when a bomb detonated inside a storage shed. But the bloodshed didn't end there. Federal investigators eventually turned their attention to a different killing, one that would help dismantle what remained of the old Kansas City Mafia. Prosecutors accused high-ranking Civella associate John Mandicina of arranging the execution-style murder of Larry Young, a government witness cooperating against the family's illegal gambling operations. In 1993, Mandicina was federally indicted on murder-for-hire charges. He was later convicted and sentenced to life in prison. For the FBI, it was more than a murder conviction. It was proof that even decades of mafia intimidation couldn't stop witnesses from talking forever. What hurts organized crime more? Long prison sentences or insiders willing to cooperate with investigators? Paranoia set in. And when they found the bodies, one of them was still sitting in a chair with his head locked inside a vise. In 1962, two Chicago outfit burglars, James Miraglia and Billy McCarthy, made a mistake that organized crime never forgives. The pair had built reputations as skilled thieves, targeting safes, businesses, and gambling operations throughout Chicago. But according to investigators and mob historians, they crossed a line when they began robbing outfit-connected establishments and allegedly withholding money from powerful mob figures. What happened next became known as the M&M murders. On October 14, 1962, Miraglia and McCarthy disappeared. Days later, their bodies were discovered in a Chicago apartment. Miraglia had been shot multiple times. McCarthy's death was even more shocking. Investigators found evidence that he had been tortured for information before being executed. His head had reportedly been secured in a bench vise, while his killers demanded answers about missing money and stolen property. The murders sent a message throughout Chicago's underworld. Stealing from the outfit wasn't just a crime, it was a death sentence. To this day, many historians consider the M&M murders one of the most infamous mob executions in Chicago history. Were the M&M murders primarily about recovering stolen money, or were they meant to terrorize everyone else and organize crime into obedience? And that's when Arnold Rothstein realized the men sitting across from him weren't asking for their money anymore. They were coming to collect. Just days earlier, Rothstein, the most powerful gambler in America, had refused to pay a massive poker debt worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. He claimed the game was fixed. The other players claimed a debt was a debt. What happened next would change organized crime forever, because Rothstein wasn't just another gangster. According to the Mob Museum, he was the man who helped turn organized crime into a business empire. The man known as the Brain. The man many believe helped orchestrate the fixing of the 1919 World Series. And now, someone wanted him dead. On November 4th, 1928, Rothstein walked into Manhattan's Park Central Hotel. Minutes later, a gunshot echoed through the building. Witnesses found America's most powerful underworld figure bleeding on the floor. But here's the part that still fascinates historians nearly a century later. Arnold Rothstein knew exactly who shot him. And he refused to tell a single person. Not the police, not the doctors, not even on his deathbed. So why would a man who built a criminal empire take the identity of his killer to the grave? If someone lives by a criminal code, should we respect their loyalty for keeping silent or condemn it because it protected a murderer? He got a bad feeling.
They called Willie Moretti the Mad Hatter of the American Mafia, not because he was weak, because he knew everything. In the 1940s, Moretti was one of the most powerful mob bosses in New Jersey. He was close to Frank Sinatra, tied to Lucky Luciano's empire, and respected by killers across the country. But by 1951, something terrifying started happening behind closed doors. Willie wouldn't stop talking. At restaurants, parties, and meetings, he rambled about mafia business to strangers, celebrities, and random civilians. According to law enforcement reports and underworld rumors, Moretti was suffering from advanced syphilis, and the disease was destroying his mind. For the mafia, that made him more dangerous than an informant. So the commission allegedly made a cold decision. Willie had to go. On October 4th, 1951, Moretti walked into a restaurant in Cliffside Park, New Jersey, expecting lunch. Instead, gunmen opened fire at point-blank range. Some mobsters later called it a mercy killing, but others believed the real message was simple. The mafia forgives weakness. It never forgives becoming a liability. This is the face of public enemy number one, and in 1934, he escaped a maximum security prison using nothing but a piece of wood and some shoe polish. John Dillinger was locked up in the Lake County Jail in Crown Point, Indiana. The police literally bragged to reporters that the building was entirely escape-proof. They even deployed extra guards and National Guardsmen outside. But inside his cell, Dillinger was busy. He smuggled in a small piece of wood, some say it was part of a washboard, and used a razor to meticulously carve it into the shape of a .38 caliber automatic pistol. To make it look real, he coated it in black shoe polish. On March 3rd, he put his plan into motion. He cornered a guard, shoved the fake wooden barrel into his ribs, and threatened to shoot. The guard, terrified, complied. Dillinger used him to capture another guard, eventually locking up over a dozen staff members in his own cell. With the keys in hand, he calmly walked out the front door. But he didn't just run. To add the ultimate insult to injury, he stole the personal brand new Ford V8 belonging to the town sheriff, Lillian Holly, and casually drove away singing a popular tune. The prison was humiliated worldwide, but stealing that specific car was actually Dillinger's biggest mistake. By driving the sheriff's stolen car across state lines into Illinois, he broke a federal law, giving the FBI a direct excuse to launch a massive nationwide manhunt that would eventually end his life. September 10th, 1931. One night changed the American underworld forever. The night of the Sicilian Vespers. For years, the American mafia was ruled by Mustache Petes, old-world bosses obsessed with back-home feuds and strict Sicilian bloodlines. But a young, ruthless visionary named Charles "Lucky" Luciano had a different plan. He wanted a modern corporate syndicate. Bloodlines? Bad for business. In a single, flawlessly coordinated strike, Luciano unleashed a nationwide purge. Hitmen disguised as police and federal agents moved simultaneously across New York, Chicago, and beyond. In less than 48 hours, the old guard was completely wiped out. No more kings, no more absolute rulers. Out of the ash, Luciano created the Commission, a corporate board of directors for organized crime. He didn't just survive the mob, he modernized it. Drop a follow for more untold history and let me know in the comments. Was Luciano a criminal genius or just a monster?
Before organized crime had corner boys, cartels, and wiretaps, the American West had outlaw crews moving like military units. And one of the most famous was the James Younger Gang. Jesse James, Frank James, Cole Younger, and their circle weren't just random robbers. Many of them were former Confederate guerrillas from Missouri, men who had already learned ambushes, raids, escape routes, and violence during the Civil War. After the war, they turned those tactics on banks, stagecoaches, and trains. But here's what made them different. They weren't always seen as regular criminals. In parts of the South and border states, Jesse James was banks, railroads, and Northern power after the Confederacy lost. That's where the social bandit image came from. But the victims still got robbed, people still got shot, and the legend often covered up the reality. The gang's run started breaking apart after the 1876 Northfield, Minnesota bank raid went bad. Townspeople fought back, gang members were killed, and the Youngers were captured. Jesse kept running until 1882, when Robert Ford shot him in the back for reward money. So was Jesse James a rebel hero, or just an outlaw with good publicity? Forget the movies. In May 1929, the United States government didn't even know the mafia existed. But these men were sitting in the Ritz-Carlton, signing the paperwork that would run America for the next 50 years. They called it the Atlantic City Conference. It wasn't a party, it was a hostile takeover. Nucky Johnson, the man who owned every cop and politician in Jersey, invited the heads of every major mob from Chicago to New York to one room. Why? Because the street wars were hurting the bottom line. Look at the logistics. They agreed to divide the country into territories. If you crossed the line without a permit, you didn't just get a fine, you got a funeral. This was the moment crime became a corporation. They even walked the boardwalk together, broad daylight, laughing at the feds because Nucky had the local DA in his pocket. But here's what the history books miss. Al Capone showed up late, acting like he owned the place. Legend says Nucky had him slapped across the face in front of everyone just to remind him whose city this was. By the time they checked out of the Ritz, the modern American syndicate was born. The feds didn't get them for the murders that followed. They got them for the one thing they couldn't hide: the taxes. Hit the plus for part 2 where we break down the paperwork that finally took Nucky down.
7 men lined up against a wall, thinking it's a routine police raid. Seconds later, it's the bloodiest crime scene in Chicago history. But the real story isn't just the gunfire, it's the ballistics. Look at these bricks. These aren't replicas. This is the actual North Clark Street wall, reconstructed here at the Mob Museum. If you look closely, you can still see the impact marks from the Thompson submachine guns. This wasn't just a hit, it was a forensic turning point. Investigators used pioneering tool mark analysis on the shell casings found at the scene to link the weapons back to Al Capone's shooters. This exhibit breaks down the actual coroner reports and the S-files that show how the mob outsmarted the law by wearing stolen police uniforms. It was the perfect crime until the science of ballistics caught up. The paperwork from this case literally birthed modern forensics. In the streets, silence is a rule. But these bricks? They talk. Have criminals figured out how to beat the forensic science of ballistics? Follow for more Street Files.
Frank Sheeran was the kind of man who made people whisper when he walked in the room. A World War II veteran, a Teamsters official, a mob associate, and according to his own confession, a hitman. They called him the Irishman. But the story that made him infamous was one name: Jimmy Hoffa. Hoffa disappeared on July 30th, 1975, after heading to a meeting near Detroit. No body, no final goodbye, just one of the biggest mysteries in American crime history. Years later, Sheeran claimed he was the man who pulled the trigger. He said Hoffa trusted him, got in the car with him, and walked into a house not knowing his friend had been sent to end him. But here's where it gets messy. Investigators and writers have questioned Sheeran's confession for years. Some say he was telling the truth. Others say he was an old gangster trying to write himself into history. So the question is, was Frank Sheeran really the man who killed Jimmy Hoffa, or was the Irishman selling one last story before death?
In the 1960s, Boston didn't have a crime family. It had a war zone. The Irish Gang War was a 6-year bloodbath between the McLaughlin Gang of Charlestown and James Buddy McLean's Winter Hill Gang. It didn't start over drugs or millions of dollars. It started over a girl and a punched face at a Labor Day party in 1961. By the time the smoke cleared in 1967, over 60 men were dead. The McLaughlins were extinct, and a young Howard Howie Winter and James Whitey Bulger had climbed over the bodies to take the throne. This wasn't just a turf war. It was the birth of the most powerful Irish criminal syndicate in American history. From car bombs in residential neighborhoods to public executions at Salisbury Beach, the city was held hostage by men who valued pride over life. This is the file on the war that created the Winter Hill legend. Watch the full breakdown on YouTube at the OC Street Files, and don't forget to look for the code word. Join the bulletin board and leave the word in the comments section for a chance to win.
Ronnie and Reggie Cray weren't just gangsters, they were celebrities with blood on their shoes. Born in East London in 1933, the identical twins came up as boxers, but by the 1950s and 60s, they were running a criminal crew called The Firm. On the surface, they owned nightclubs, shook hands with entertainers, and moved around like local legends. Behind that image, police linked their empire to extortion, armed robbery, arson, assaults, gambling rackets, and murder. Ronnie was the unstable one. Reggie was the smoother one, but together they were dangerous. Their name carried so much fear that people whispered before they testified. Then came the murders that finally cracked the myth. In 1966, Ronnie shot George Cornell inside the Blind Beggar pub. In 1967, Reggie killed Jack the Hat McVitie after a botched murder-for-hire situation. By 1968, the twins were arrested. In 1969, they were sentenced to life in prison. But here's the crazy part. Even after all that, some people still romanticize them like they were folk heroes. That's where the story gets dangerous. Because the craze understood branding before social media existed. Suits, clubs, celebrity friends, public charm, private terror. Follow OC Street Files for more real crime history. And tell me this. Why do people turn gangsters into legends after the damage is already done?
Joseph Joe Cargo Valachi, the man many call the original snitch of the mafia world. Before Valachi, the American mafia wasn't even supposed to exist publicly. This was a secret society built on one rule: omerta, the code of silence. Break it, and you die. But in 1963, everything changed. Valachi got locked up and believed the boss Vito Genovese had put a hit out on him. So instead of staying solid, he flipped, and not quietly. He went in front of Congress and exposed everything: families, structure, rituals, even confirming the mafia was real. This was during the Valachi hearings. From that moment on, the streets changed. Because if a made man could talk, anybody could. Some call him a coward. Others say he was just trying to survive. But one thing's for sure: Joseph Valachi didn't just snitch. He rewrote the rules of silence forever. If you were in his position, you staying solid or saving yourself. Follow the page for more Street Files. He wore a badge, but secretly worked for the mob. For over 20 years, Anthony Twan Doyle wasn't just a Chicago police officer. He was a pipeline between law enforcement and the Chicago outfit. Let that sink in. While detectives were building murder cases, Doyle was feeding information straight to organized crime figures tied to multiple killings. Federal prosecutors later called him a sleeper agent, a cop embedded inside the system, working for the other side. This wasn't small-time corruption. Doyle had access to police databases, investigations, and active cases. He allegedly passed along sensitive information that could protect mob members and potentially put witnesses in danger. And it all came crashing down during one of the biggest mob takedowns in Chicago history, Operation Family Secrets. That case exposed decades of murders, hits, and organized crime activity tied to the Chicago outfit. Doyle wasn't charged with pulling the trigger, but he helped keep the machine running. He was eventually convicted of racketeering conspiracy and sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. A cop, working for killers. So let me ask you this. How many others are still inside the system right now? Follow for more real stories. Dean O'Banion was gone, but the Northside Gang wasn't finished. If anything, they got colder. Taking over was a man who didn't play games, didn't smile, and didn't forget. Jaime Weiss. Where O'Banion was strategic, Weiss was ruthless. Loyal to O'Banion to the end, he saw the murder for what it was: not business, war. And he made one thing clear: anybody involved in O'Banion's death was a target. Shootings started happening across Chicago, not random, calculated hits. Southside spots were attacked. Capone's operations were being tested. The streets started shifting. Weiss didn't just want revenge, he wanted Capone gone. At one point, Weiss and his crew got so close to killing Capone that they ambushed his headquarters at the Hawthorne Hotel, bullets tearing through the building in broad daylight. Capone barely survived. That's how serious this got. This wasn't street beef anymore. This was organized warfare between two of the most powerful crime factions in the country, and Chicago was caught in the middle. But here's the truth about war: nobody stays on top forever. He didn't look like a killer.